Now I'm very happy to introduce our speaker today, Stephanie Morgan, a serial award-winning producer of social entertainment products. She's founder and C3PO at Rabbit. I'm sure she'll explain to us what that means. And she's produced such titles as Godfinger, the first God game for the iPhone and iPod Touch. Great stuff. She's spoken at WWDC, and we're very happy to have her speaking to us today. Stephanie Morgan.
Woo. Okay. First important test. Yes, my mic is on. Fucking awesome. Okay. So thank you so much, Erica. I'm really psyched to be here. And thanks, TypeKit. I've never been in these offices before. They're beautiful. It's amazing. Totally makes up for being up earlier than I would normally like to be, actually. As she said, I'm Stephanie Morgan. I've been a producer and designer of video games for the last decade plus, which is kind of trippy. I'm here to kind of talk about why gamification sucks. And just kind of clarify, like, a little caveat before we get going. For the record, video games do not suck. Video games are awesome. Video games are amazing. I love making them. I love playing them. I think that they are a really powerful, immersive medium and a real art form. And I think that they bring out a really interesting type of creativity in both the people who make them and the people who play them that you can't really get from any other kind of interactive medium. But the kind of principles of game design and the way that it is used in gamification, the way it is implemented now, I think it's just kind of like this thing that has come about as this quest for this new shiny, like, what's the hot new big thing? And it's a really shallow and kind of cursory take on what makes games interesting, just really taking things that are visible and sort of more obvious on the surface without actually understanding the design principles and thinking and philosophy that make something like a score, which seems very simple, have actual meaning and impact for the player and why it resonates and why it's something that can actually be powerful. Before I actually even dig in a little bit, I just kind of want to know, like, how many of you guys actually play games? Yeah! I love you guys. Okay. How many of you would label yourself a gamer? Just kind of curious. So that's interesting. That's a lot less hands, which I think kind of shows, like, games are really powerful, but somehow this idea of, like, gamer indicates something that's more hardcore than maybe it is. I think everybody who raised their hand the first time, you're a fucking gamer. You just don't know it yet. Have any of you tried to make an app or a website or something that used principles of gamification, however you sort of interpret that or what that means? A couple of you. Okay, cool. Very useful. Thank you. So what I want to kind of start with is really identifying, just so we're all kind of on the same page, what I mean by gamification and sort of how it is classically defined. So the people at Wikipedia say that gamification is the use of game design techniques and mechanics to solve problems and engage audiences. Okay, so that sounds pretty straightforward, pretty cool. I think that if that was actually what gamification was in its implementation, I think it'd probably be a very powerful and interesting tool. But like I said, I think that gamification, the way it is typically applied, it really is just taking things that are surfacely exposed to players and, again, not really digging into the design elements of it, which we're going to talk about today. So for me, right now, gamification is a misinterpretation of frequently used game features and functionality and mistaking those for true game mechanics. So we're going to talk about a couple, there's not very much time, so I'm going to run through 3 different typical gamification tools and kind of dissect them in a gamification context, and then talk about sort of how we would actually think about those in terms of game design, which hopefully can add a little more depth. So scores and points, which seems pretty obvious, right? You earn points for doing things. It could be any type of activity. Achievements, which would be things like badges or mayoردom or whatever. It's kind of like something that you earn for accomplishing some set of tasks, and yay, you get to showcase like I'm badass, I fucking did all this shit, I rock to the world. And then avatars, which are like a virtual representation of you in whatever universe that you're sort of constructing. So let's start with scores and points. So this is from the Huffington Post. I chose them because they are one of the initial sort of purveyors of gamification as a concept, and got like a ton of buzz and press and acclaim for being on the vanguard of this cutting edge movement, and really thought that they saw some impact from bringing gamification into their site. But let's kind of talk about how they implemented it and sort of how it could be better. So starting with the stats board, right? That's their representation of scoring. And so within that, it's really just a straight up fucking one-to-one tally of you did this action this many times, right? So this dude, total number of comments, and then they kind of break it down. Is it news, or a comment about news, or is it a comment about blogs? How many friends they have, and it is a literal one-to-one tally of every single action. Now, in games, yeah, you have a score that sort of like represents the various points that you've kind of accumulated through those actions, but those scores actually have deeper meaning than a straight up count of everything you did in the game. They tie directly into the compulsion loops that are feeding the mechanics of the game. So let's talk about compulsion loops really quickly. So I'm gonna run through a very classic compulsion loop. Y'all are fucking gamers, you're awesome. You have participated in this compulsion loop many times, right? So you run around, you're fighting monsters like you're being awesome, yay. You earn some gold for every time you kill the monster. Sweet, you're getting rich, you're saving that shit up so that you can buy amazing stuff, right? So you can buy better weapons, you can buy better armor, you can just like buff your character up so that you can run around and kill even more monsters who are stronger and tougher, so you can get more gold, so that you can buy more stuff, so you can kill more monsters. And what's going on there, right? Each individual action is feeding into the next in this seamless loop where you always know why you're doing what you are doing, and every action leads you to want to do something else. And in a game like this, like your score would be a set of stats. So this is Diablo, really classic. It'd be a set of stats that directly feed back into the compulsion loop. So this chick, Lilia, she's level 10. She's got this much experience that she's earned from running around killing monsters. She knows how far it is to the next level. Her strength, dexterity, vitality, all of those things actually impact the types of monsters that she can fight successfully, or what types of things she needs to do in order to defeat those monsters, to get more gold, to buy more stuff, so that she can kill more of the monsters and level up. So it is not only a reflection of what she has done in the game, but impacts kind of how she can experience the game. Let's think about like the mechanics of combat. So again, within that compulsion loop is not just a set of actions. There are a bunch of mechanics that are contained within those actions. And this is mechanics in the true game sense, not in like score. Like for the combat, there's a bunch of design decisions that go into, okay, is it a stealth type of combat or melee? Are you using weapons? Are you using armor? Are you fighting a shit ton of monsters of all lesser health, but the volume of them is what makes it difficult? Are you fighting like one big mega boss who like wants to kick your ass? All of those things are the actual mechanics of the game, and her score is a reflection of how she has experimented and implemented and iterated and really understood and mastered those mechanics themselves. And again, it all feeds back into the compulsion loop. So if you go back to this dude Philo here, like, yes, there is a literal one-to-one tally of everything that he has done, and on some level, sure, that's a reflection of engagement because he's actually doing stuff, but it's not taking advantage of the score and the type of engagement that it actually could provide if you layered on different types of thinking tied to compulsion loops and understanding of the power there. So for instance, if tied to this there was a meta score that kind of reflected like how many of his comments like generated other comments from other people or how much he interacted with those comments back, something that actually was a deeper measure of engagement that would give much more value from his perception and from everyone else's perception tied to these individual stats and would help to qualify them and kind of make a stronger emotional attachment to them and drive deeper engagement than just putting the numbers up themselves can do. Similarly, like achievements, here he's got a bunch of badges, but again, really these achievements are one-to-one stats, but masked with kind of prettier graphics. So like the networker achievement, okay, he had to have X number of friends to get the networker achievement. Super user, okay, he had to post X number of comments in order to get that badge. But again, it's still just a straight up tally of this particular action I do it X number of times, yay. So there's some sense of achievement there, but nothing that is really super deep. It's very, very, it's not a very sophisticated system. And there would be ways that you could take even that tally count and make it deeper and again tie it back into the compulsion loop so it's driving much more activity than it would by just doing a straight up tally and making it much more fun and playful for the person and much more satisfying when they actually get it. So if we go back to our awesome little RPG game running around doing whatever. So if you were to make an achievement, say for this type of game, you might say, okay, like your achievement is going to be earned if you kill 10 crazy trolls without getting damage to yourself. All right, there's still a number there. You're trying to kill 10 trolls. But the way that you do that and the difficulty kind of like connected, these trolls are crazy tough, you're not supposed to get any damage. There's a bunch of strategy that is tied to how you approach that. And there's a bunch of different ways to kind of problem solve how you can get that. So when you do it, it has more meaning to you. So maybe like you kill a bunch of monsters in order to get a lot of gold so that you can buy this really awesome thing that makes you move a lot quicker because trolls are slow. And so your strategy is to kind of like dodge and weave and kind of like attack them that way. Or maybe like you go and kill a bunch of crazy dragons because they drop some really rare like awesome shield that protects you better. So when you go into battle, you're actually not going to be incurring damage. There's a bunch of different ways to kind of approach it, but each one is going to be a little bit unique to the player and is going to therefore involve more emotional attachment, like you have actually done something and really feel like you've accomplished something when you finally get that achievement for killing 10 trolls, right? It ties back into the compulsion loop, drives a different type of engagement and even kind of emergent behavior that maybe the original designers didn't even think about. Next, I'm going to talk about avatars. So this is website Chill, which is really a turntable FM kind of clone, where you watch videos instead of listening to music. And here, okay, they've got avatars, great, and you kind of start to see that they probably only have avatars because Turntable had avatars, and they really don't understand what they're supposed to do or why you would have them and why just putting a picture of something on a screen doesn't automatically make you go, yep, that's me. So you see, the only thing that the avatars are really doing here is giving you some indication of how many people are in the room. If you look in comparison to Turntable, which I do think actually uses avatars well, what they're doing is all of those dudes are looking at the DJ, right? That's what I, as the person who is participating in Turntable, I'm listening to the music. I'm paying attention to DJ. I'm like having, it is a direct extension of the experience that I myself am having, which makes me feel much more like, okay, that's a representation of me in this space. The dude's like, you know, you say, yeah, it's awesome, your little dude rocks out. You know, everything that you do is sort of directly reflected in the avatar. And even the DJs, right there up on the podium thing, and they're like, it's very clear who is doing what, and it's all, again, directly representational of what you yourself are doing in real life. And that makes you have much more of a connection, much more believe that, yes, this is really, really me. Go back to these dudes again. They're not even fucking watching the video, right? I mean, they're just like staring off into space in some random netherland, like just being like, yep, I'm you. And that's so not interesting. And yeah, avatars are obviously a common thing that is used, but you don't even need to have an avatar if you think about how you present you within the world. You can feel a strong sense of identity and self within a game without even needing that representation. Like if you think about like a first-person shooter, so this is Half-Life, side note, best fucking game ever. You know, you see that there's a gun and sort of a hand, but really that's to help you guide where it is you're aiming. You don't really view or think of that as you. The reason that you think that you are this person in this world is because you control where the camera goes. You interact with objects and they respond to you. You like talk to a dude and they talk back to you. You shoot a monster and like they react and try to kill you. It's because of the fact that you are having some impact in the world that you believe that you are you and that there's something there. And so again, going back, Turntable, they're taking that principle and actually applying it really, really well. Right, again, everything that you do is sort of an extension and is represented through the avatar. Chill? Not so much. So that's kind of it. I went through a couple different ideas kind of tied to game design and philosophy and sort of how a couple really simple things like scores and points. I mean, there are so many things I could go on about, like leaderboards are used all the time, but they have the same issue kind of tied to scores and points. Like, why do I care if I'm climbing up a leaderboard if I'm not really even that attached to the score? Or like challenges or invitations and things which are supposed to be encouraging virality, but again, if there's not an actual, some sort of compulsion loop driving a sense of social obligation, it's not going to be that powerful, really. You're not going to feel like you need to participate. But I did only have 20 minutes, so those are the 3 things that I got to talk to you about. That's it. Thank you.
Great. So does anybody have any questions for Stephanie?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about social prediction markets like in trade, where it's a very, like the core value of the website is basically a game where you kind of wager some amount of money or some scarce resource, and then you make a prediction that something is going to happen and someone else wagers against it versus this and that. Like, I mean, do you think that's a good example of gamification, or?
Yeah, I do. I think that there are a bunch of different elements that kind of tie into play and kind of what makes something fun. And some of that is a sense of skill and mastery. Some of that is a little bit of randomness and luck and kind of like, and feeling like there's stakes in the outcome. And I think that the kinds of things you're describing actually tap really well into all of those different elements that where there actually is a true game kind of happening, and is actually playing on a bunch of the same things that make like poker or other games like that interesting, because there is a sense of control and around the outcome, and like you can be skillful and good at it. But there's a little bit of like randomness kind of tied to it as well. And it's kind of your skill is really how you react and respond to that plus a little clever money management, which is also something you do in cards. Yeah?
How do you feel about using scores as kind of a representation of engagement? Like, there's Reddit and companies where you have like late karma or sort of an upvote score versus cloud where it's a score that kind of represents you as a whole. How do you feel about this?
So scores, numbers are powerful, right? I mean, intrinsically, there's something in human beings where you're like, I want a fucking bigger number, right? And there is a driver there. But I think that the problem is that, and I think Clout probably discovered this by the fact that people aren't paying quite so much attention to it. Their scores need to have some type of meaning that really is impactful to you, and you need to feel like you can control how big that number is going to get, right? Just kind of labeling something arbitrarily where you just feel like, wow, no matter what I do, it's not really a representative of who I am or what I'm doing or whatever. I don't think it's so much, is it you or is it some sort of small action? I think it's more about that game design idea that your score will somehow reflect your awesomeness and you can control that. I think it's more about how the principles themselves are applied, not so much whether that number is allocated to what. Yeah?
So I'm thinking of, the shooters or killing monsters. You can basically do that for hours or pretty much limitless, right?
Yeah.
But
15 hours of your life can go away like that.
then we have these, I don't know, say a social app where it's reality-based and they want to gamify it. And it depends on, what you do in real life, and there's only so much you can really do. And they want to gamify it, so then you have this limitation. Is it really crippling because you can't feed the compulsion loop that much, or can we exploit that?
Well, so, I mean, good games, so I described like one kind of basic compulsion loop, but even like the simplest good games actually have a number of different compulsion loops sort of layered that all feed into one another. And you always have a time constraint, even in the games where like 15 hours of your life goes away. Like you are making, there's only so much you can actually accomplish in that 15-hour period. I think that there's an interesting opportunity tied to real life in the sense that it could be more ad hoc and in theory actually would give you more time to be playing the game. I just think that people haven't quite figured out what the right game design is as applied to real life. I think that's a really tricky problem. I definitely don't know the answer to that, but I think that if you thought about, the things that are fun in life really are connected to play, and people are, humans are very playful creatures, and even being social together in real life, I think, has a strong sense of play. There's got to be a way of kind of designing compulsion loops that actually do fit in better, and where, for all intents and purposes, you could be playing 24 hours a day. I just don't think we've figured that out yet. Yeah?
So, sort of piggyback on that question, I'm wondering if you see in certain sort of industries or in certain games where gamification is being introduced into an interaction, that there's already some sort of social interaction, and the gaming sort of takes the place of the interaction that you already have, or it becomes the focus in something. Like, if I'm thinking about Clout in particular, you can, I think, focus on being, like, getting your score up by, like, changing the way that you tweet, right, or changing the way that you post. And it's changing the type of interaction you're having with other people that actually aren't in the game. And I wonder if you see, like, because you're playing a game with your score, and with your interaction, they don't really know they're part of it. And I'm wondering if you see is there any place that you think, like, just shouldn't have like, you shouldn't gamify because it doesn't, like, it draws attention away from, like, the more meaningful interaction, or if there's a way to have them really support each other.
I think that goes back to how you approach the design again. a better design would be something that where your strategy didn't necessarily make you sort of less human for all intents and purposes, right? Like you're talking about changing your natural inclination and how you want to be truly social with somebody in order to kind of like game the system and like apply the strategy to like move forward and forward and forward. And I think that that's a failure in the scoring, in kind of the game design itself, not so much in the concept of applying game ideas to this.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So what do you think as like video games, or I'm sorry, like applications and software are adding interfaces to like everything now? But if you look at like new video games, they're actually getting rid of these interfaces. They're trying to be more like real life, and they're getting rid of the numbers on the screen. I don't know.
That's actually interesting because I've been thinking a lot about that. I didn't really talk about it, but I just started a new company that is building an app. It's the first time I have not made a game in fucking forever. And so I've been thinking a lot about how UI, UX from a game design perspective can actually be applied to apps. And a big part of I think good game design is, at least in terms of UI, is tied to presentation and simplicity. And again, for games to really work, like you kind of need to instinctively have a crazy amount of information present to you in a way that you just intuitively and without really any time delay understand. And then the controls themselves need to be completely instinctual as well, right? And I feel like apps a lot of times have just kind of been regurgitating existing design tropes because that's kind of just how people are accustomed to it and sort of how things are done. And that if you took a step back and just thought about, okay, what are things that we could do in, God, like fucking even Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, things like what can you do to take the simple things that people really want and make that much more instinctive and much more obvious and not kind of use this classic menu sort of like structure? Like how can you rethink how you interact in a way that just is more contextualized and makes more sense? And that's something that I've been playing with. I don't know.
So how do video games do that? The new video games do that better? Or, you know, they're getting rid of those kind of cues, but I guess what are they providing that actually works? That
I mean, what they're providing is much more contextualized information, I think, like, and different types of feedback. So I think that before, audio probably wasn't fully taken advantage of in the way that it could be in games. There was a reliance a lot more on like pow or like 10 points or whatever, and not so much on really noticing how different audio cues can actually impact and help you understand what is happening, and like color changes and all of these different things where if I punch somebody and every single time there's like a blue particle effect and a particular sound effect, I will understand that that gives me 50 points. And you know, it's just kind of rethinking how you're communicating using more audio and visual, I think, is really what's gone on in games, plus touchscreen. Like the need to, I think the iPhone really, really helped to transform the way people were thinking about game design because it really forced you to, again, have to re-examine all of these existing tropes that had been there in game design and really forced you to be like, okay, what the fuck? I can't do all of these things that you would normally do. And I think that was really beneficial. Yeah?
Do you feel that there's
degree of negative backlash as people, a big part of the audience for games realize that more games are being designed to specifically feed the compulsion loop instead of a traditional end of a game?
I think all good games have always been designed around compulsion loops. I don't think that that is a new thing at all. I think that what people consistently react to is change, right? So like, there's a brilliant core compulsion loop in Pong. There's a brilliant core compulsion loop in Frogger and Pac-Man and all of these kind of classic things. There's obviously like, you know, Doom, all of these games that people that are iconic, Half-Life, they all have one brilliant kind of core compulsion loop, and that's why they're good games. But then like what you're kind of tapping into is kind of the fragmentation that does occur within the gaming community around like hardcore versus casual versus social, and there's a kind of faux hierarchy that is sort of constructed, like if you don't play, you know, WoW, then you are just not a serious gamer, you are blah, 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 whatever. There's a judgment that's kind of tied to that. And I think that people, even the same people who would be like, wow, Pac-Man's the best game ever, like even at the dawn of the casual browser-based games, like we're like, oh my god, but Zuma's so stupid. Like that's just nowhere near as good as Pac-Man. And there's this constant like reaction to whatever they sort of perceive as the new shiny thing. And right now that would be social games and like Facebook. But really, a game like Farmville is successful because there is actually well thought out design happening there.
I think we have time for one more quick question, if anybody has one. All right then.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.